Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, morning, and evening to all of you. I'm Gabriel Darong. I am from South Africa, but also I'm one of the two conveners of the WAU, World Anthropological Union, convening most of our webinars, and the other convener here is Virginia. However, for today's webinar, we've been assisted we've been convened by Giovanna, who is the commission chairperson of education in the IUAES, but also who is the chair of the task force on education in the WCAA. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, these are the two chambers that make up the WOW, the World Anthropological Union. It is made up of the International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, as well as the World Council of Anthropological Associations. So both chambers convene these webinars and we alternate. However, for today's, as I stated, Giovanna, who falls into both chambers, will be guiding us. And I just want to welcome all of you here today for your presence, and we trust that you'll be able to contribute effectively to this important discussion on anthropology, but also education and what we can do beyond anthropology with the idea of education. Thank you so much, colleagues. I will hand over the convening task or responsibility to Giovanna. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you also to the WOW for your great support for this webinar. Also, I want to welcome all the participants in this webinar on anthropological education. We can ask anthropological education for whom? For non-anthropologists. For several years now, and certainly since 2019 IUES Congress, the World Anthropological Union has been broadening its outreach to non-anthropologists, starting with a writing workshop for non-anthropologists, but maybe also before, and other online workshops on creativity. In doing so, it has given new recognition to those working with various anthropological associations around the world to engage new audiences and non-strictly academic fields. How did this webinar come about? It comes from a triangular idea conceived about a year ago. This three-pronged idea took shape as three interconnected roundtable discussions at the WOW Congress 2025 in Guatemala, the last Congress. These roundtables were organized by the WCAA Task Force on Anthropological Education and New Audiences, with the participation of members of the IUS Commission on Anthropology and Education. We wanted to answer three main questions, important questions. How can we engage schools? How can we engage bodies and organizations? How can we engage non-anthropologists? We had already addressed the first two questions during the last World Congress. Today, we are going to address the final question. How can we engage non-anthropologists? This will be followed by the comments of Mimina Pateiraki, a member of the Commission on Anthropology and Education, and by a discussion open to the public. Roberta Bonetti is our moderator. She is also a member of the Task Force on Anthropological Education New Audiences, and she is also in the board of the IUES Commission on Anthropology and Education. She teaches the anthropology of education and applied anthropology at the University of Bologna in Italy. And for over 20 years, she has been promoting anthropology, creating multimodal resources in various educational settings at all levels. Roberta, now the floor is yours. You are our moderator. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Giovanna. Thank you, Gabriel, for your introduction and presentation. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thank you all for being here. Today, we'll organize our discussion into 3 rounds. In each round, I invite each of you to answer in about 4 minutes so that everyone has enough time to contribute. And we can leave some time for discussion at the end of the 3 rounds. For all the participants, for the public, I will introduce each speaker with a few words before inviting them to answer. Let's start with the fourth question. In what context do you reach or intend to reach non-anthropologists and new audiences? Could you briefly explain who these audiences are and where you meet or interact with them, and what motivates you to engage with them? Our first speaker is Leonardo Campoi. Leonardo is an anthropologist and professor at the State University of Pernambuco in northeastern Brazil. Throughout his career, he has studied music, religion, autism, disability, and more recently, education from an anthropological perspective. Thank you, Leonardo, for being here. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you, Roberta. Well, let me just start reading what I have prepared for us this morning here in Brazil, this afternoon in Europe. So, in what context do you address or intend to address people who are not anthropologists and a new audience? Well, I am an anthropologist affiliated with a Department of Education, where I am primarily responsible for teaching anthropology of education. At the university where I teach, anthropology of education is a required course for all teacher education programs. Whether they are studying mathematics, chemistry, physics, biology, history, geography, languages and literature, or any other teaching field, all students preparing to become school teachers must take anthropology of education. It is within this context that I teach anthropology to students who are neither anthropologists nor intend to become anthropologists. As part of the education of future teachers who will work in Brazilian schools, teaching every subject imaginable. The challenge is twofold. It involves not only introducing students to fundamentals of anthropology, but also demonstrating how anthropology can help us understand education and inform our practice as educators, not only in schools, but also in other settings such as hospitals, prisons, indigenous communities, and social movements. Beyond this dual challenge, it is important to emphasize that my teaching context is also shaped by the characteristics of the generation of young people currently entering higher education. These students were born between 2005 and 2009, and their experiences have been profoundly shaped by smartphones and social media. The ways in which they engage with reading and sustain attention differ significantly from those of my own generation. Moreover, in recent years, we have been welcoming students whose education included 2 or 3 years of online learning as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This raises an important question. How can we teach anthropology a discipline whose knowledge is largely conveyed through lengthy and often demanding texts to students who have done relatively little sustained reading throughout their educational trajectories and who seem better equipped to divide their attention among multiple streams of digital media than to focus deeply on a single text for an extended period. Furthermore, how can we ask these students to produce original written work, a skill that has always been fundamental to the teaching and learning of anthropology, at a time when artificial intelligence is advancing so rapidly? This then is the context in which I teach anthropology to non-anthropologists. Well, that is
Thank you,
how I would answer the first question. Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you, Leonardo. Our next speaker is Alexander Cordoves. Alexander is originally from Cuba and is an independent researcher working at the intersection of anthropology and psychology. For 12 years, he worked at the University of Holguín in Cuba, conducted educational research in different contexts. He also carried out one of the first ethnographic studies in a Cuban secondary school, analyzing teachers' trajectories in relation to educational policies. In 2023, he received a Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship at the Danish School of Education, where he conducted research on higher education reforms in Cuba. Alexander, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And so my general context then to talk is Cuba, and I will focus my comments on my research experience in educational anthropology there. In my country, anthropological studies were subsumed under folkloric or religious studies for decades. In this sense, anthropology was not entirely absent. Only physical anthropology retained the name, while some ethnological studies focusing on our cultural or ethnic roots has been also undertaken. As far as I know, before my PhD, only 2 studies has been carried out in educational institution in Havana, focusing on children's games during active breaks at the school and on race relations. Actually, other studies have focus on educational issues, but outside schools or educational institutions. This is therefore a context dominated by the field of pedagogy and psychology, where research is often expected to be more normative, intervention-oriented, and solution-driven. In this setting, anthropology may appear overly descriptive or insufficiently useful in immediate terms. As a result, I was not only introducing a discipline in my fieldwork, but also negotiating what counts as valid knowledge. The recurring question, what is anthropology, was not only a challenge, but also an opportunity to open dialogue and reflect on different ways of understanding educational realities in Cuba. This is my approach to the context in which I have to work engaging non-anthropologists, specifically in research. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Alexander. Is there Celine? Celine, are you here? No, maybe not.
No.
So I pass to Anita. Anita is an applied medical anthropologist and lecturer at the Faculty of Health Sciences at the Ben-Gurion University in Israel. Her research focuses on comprehensive sexuality education, gender, maternal health, and culturally sensitive healthcare. She has worked extensively with international organizations such as UNAIDS and the Global Fund, leading participatory research and community-based health projects, particularly in Africa. Throughout her career, she has been deeply engaged in working with diverse non-anthropological audiences. Anita is also chair of the IUAES Commission on Anthropology of Pandemics and deputy head of the same Council of Commissions. Anita, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, for me, it was very difficult to try to choose what I'm going to talk about because
I know.
many, and I wrote you through many years of work in the field and not and very little in the academy.
But you can take more minutes because
No, I
Celine
will
is
more or
not
less
here.
try to take the first question was populations. Like I actually started working in medical services of youth villages that are like residential schools, boarding schools, when unaccompanied Ethiopian immigrant minors came to Israel, and they had spent many of them months or years in refugee camps in Sudan. And basically, they had no family, so they were in these residential schools, and it was a shock, the new environment. And of course, the health services provided were also were not, they didn't really understand them. So at the time, a friend introduced me to a doctor, actually a South African doctor called Dr. Emmanuel Giger, who I always remember because he was a pioneer in adolescent cells and reproductive cells. And basically what he told me, we have serious health issues that must be related to cultural issues, and we need to understand them ASAP. No room for long academic research. Do it now, more or less. So like one of them was malaria, recurrent malaria after some of the adolescents got the treatment. And that's another story if we have time. So there I actually work with young people, with medical staff, and those were the non-anthropologists. And together they put together programs for adolescents that I will tell you later. And for me, it was a bit difficult to divide. The second thing was basically, I can say, the most important, or the love of my life, of my professional life, and this was comprehensive educational sexuality for adolescents. If someone tells me today what I want to do more, it's that. And again, we began with Ethiopian adolescents. It went on with all the adolescents in the boarding schools. But when they arrived, immediately it became evident that there were problems from, coming from villages in Ethiopia, being in refugee camps, and coming to Israel that was completely different. So there were problems that had to do with sexuality, and no one knew what to do with it. So again, we did research, like we did in every case, applied research with other people from the community in small groups. And we developed on this. After this, we developed programs that I'm going to tell you in the second phase. But the interesting thing is that we did some courses here in Israel that were actually initiated by UNICEF, UNAIDS, and Mashab, which is the Israeli Development Corporation. And we did this with people that came mostly from Africa, and then they went back, developed programs there. And I'm really, really glad that Martin Ellie is here. I invited a few of these people that I began working with 20 years ago. Martin Ellie is from Sierra Leone. And if we give him later a minute or two here, Martin's here, maybe he can tell his part. And there's one more population. Hi, Martin. There's one more population that has to do with rapid assessment relating to culture and gender barriers to HIV mother-to-child transmission. And that was a project that I also worked mostly in Africa, but also in India. And here we work with community members. Community members were the non-anthropologists that were trained, that did the research, that helped develop the programs, which I will tell you more later. And there's another group that I won't have time to talk about. So if it's all right with you, maybe let's let Martin say a couple of words. I mean, I'm really moved that Martin is here. Oh, is that okay? Where are you, Martin? Martin, can you open up?
Yes, I'm here, Dr. Noduman, Anita. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. We here in Sierra Leone had the opportunity to work with Dr. Noduman to come to Sierra Leone with a team from Israel. And at that time, we were having an increase in the number of HIV cases among adolescents and young people. And so Dr. Noduman came in together with a team. And we organized training for health program managers here in Sierra Leone. And then later we engaged youths and adolescents. And that actually led to the formation of what we call SLICA, which is a network or an organization of young people, responding to HIV in Sierra Leone.
Martin, could you tell you, I mean, this program only got on foot because of Martin. Martin trained here for a month and he was supported by UNICEF, probably in 29 or something like that. But Martin, could you explain what your profession is, what you do? Because Martin is an anthropologist, like all these people that work there. Martin?
Yes, thank you. So I actually work with the network of HIV positives in Sierra Leone. And I've been doing this for nearly 1 decade and a half. And we support people living with HIV across Sierra Leone, including young people. I'm talking about over 12,000 people living with HIV in Sierra Leone, including adolescents, women living with HIV. And what we do is to ensure that they have access to treatment, and they also have access to information empowerment as to how they live positively with HIV. But then also we support the national response to HIV by way of working with adolescents and young people so that, they live, by ensuring that they do not contract HIV, and the increased uptake of prevention services here in Sierra Leone. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Nodoman.
Okay, thank you. Anyhow, this was a big surprise, but it's an example. I mean, Martin and I met almost 20 years ago, and they're continuing to work. So our work together and my 3 times to visit them in Sierra Leone were very important. So that's about the end. I have another program with global health medical students, but we won't get to that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita and Martin, for your presentation. Our final speaker for this first round is Yasmin Tabassum. Yasmin is a very young anthropologist and educator committed to making anthropology accessible to wider audiences. She is our social media manager for the IUAES Commission, Anthropology and Education, where she develops posts, infographics, and interactive content to communicate anthropological ideas to teachers, students, and general public. She's also a summer intern with the Anthropos India Foundation, contributing to educational projects and community outreach. Her work focuses on transforming anthropological research into accessible stories, educational materials, and public engagement activities. Her goal is to show how anthropology can improve healthcare, education, policy, and social justice. Yasmin, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Okay, so in order to answer the first question, I will be sharing my perspective as a student of anthropology. So when we talk about reaching new audiences, we often look at the public. But as a student, I am right in the middle of this. Reaching new audiences is something I live every day as a student of anthropology. When I tell my friends or family, in family, I have non-anthropologists, some are from computer applications, some are lawyers and all. So, it is very difficult to make them understand what I study. They often ask me that, what will you become with, studying anthropology? So unlike biology, which people quickly connect to medicine, anthropology feels unfamiliar to them. But when I explain it in simple words, I see their excitement. They begin to understand how anthropology connects to health, education, rituals, and everyday life. I see how excited they get when they understand anthropology, but I also see how quickly they lose interest when I make it too complicated. So these everyday conversations show me that anthropology must be clear and relatable. If we make it too complicated, people lose interest. But when we use stories, examples, and cultural practices they already know, anthropology feels alive. So today, from my everyday conversations, I have learned three, lessons about reaching new audience, which I'm going to present. Like point one is dropping the academic jargon. Our first big challenge is language. Anthropology has a beautiful toolkit, but we hide it behind heavy academic words. So heavy academic words, they don't mean anything to non-anthropologists. It may be, but it's very difficult for them to understand. I am studying anthropology since 2009, and still I read some articles, some books, and I feel like, oh, it is difficult to understand. So I think these kind of things, they just build a wall. I believe our goal should be strategic empathy, like understanding the emic perspective of the non-anthropologists, the new audiences to whom we are, trying to teach anthropology or make them understand anthropology. So we need to translate, complex cultural ideas into universal language. For example, just a small example, like don't just teach theory, show how ethnography solves real problems, show how it helps and is helping tribal healthcare, by documenting local healing practices, and working with communities to integrate them into official health programs, or how it helps a care provider understand the care recipient from different cultures. My second point is like meet people where they are. Our second challenge is where we share our knowledge. Traditional academic journals are closed and expensive. New audiences do not read them. They live online, on social media, and in digital communities. As a younger generation, we know how people consume information today. So we should use this to our advantage. Instead of asking students to write another 20-page essay, which I used to do, in my PG days, that only one professor is going to read. Let us assign, small public projects, or imagine if students created a short podcast episode, or write an opinion article for a local newspaper, or make an educational video series. This teaches students how to be communicators, and it shares anthropology with the world for free. The third point I want to focus on rethinking the classroom. Finally, we need to change how we welcome people into our discipline. Intro courses are full of students taking electives. This is our best chance to include them. Along with old textbooks, let's bring in graphic novels, ethnographic stories, or everyday cultural objects. Like, start a class by looking at a tribal healing practices, a local festival, or a street food stall, or also the board is there, there is a coffee cup, there is chalk, there is duster. So trace the journey of it, the rituals, the social meanings, and the human stories behind it. This makes anthropology, feel alive and relevant to their own lives immediately. So to wrap up, I would say that students are not just learning anthropology, we are its best ambassadors. So if we simplify our language and embrace the tools, digital tools, we can make our discipline accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you. Giovanna, do you know if Celine has arrived in the meantime?
I don't see her online
So she's
yet.
not here yet.
Yes, I said that there was a conflict in
yes, I know. I saw the email.
Yeah,
But I ask you. Anyway,
let's continue.
Let's move to our second question. What strategies or experiences have you developed to reach non-anthropologists and new audiences? We'd love to hear about any concrete projects, methods, or creative approaches you have used. Leonardo, let's start with you again.
All right, Roberta. Well, given the context I outlined earlier, teaching anthropology of education to future primary and secondary school teachers and to a generation that is less accustomed to sustained reading, writing, and deep concentration, my strategy for engaging non-anthropologists with anthropology has been to translate anthropological knowledge into anthropological competencies. In other words, rather than focusing primarily on teaching concepts, theories, traditions, and schools of anthropological thought, I have sought to design classes and activities that cultivate students' ability to perceive and act anthropologically within educational contexts. In practical terms, I have reduced the number of books and articles assigned as required reading, and above all, I encourage students to undertake what I call ethnographic exercises. I invite them to go out into the world, even without a formal understanding of what ethnography is, and to observe social realities and interact with the people who inhabit them. Based on these experiences, which are almost always brief because of the limited duration of the course, I ask students to produce written texts, podcasts, and videos in which they organize their observations into some form of narrative. The aim of these activities is for students in post-scholar words to taste the world, to encounter through their senses social realities that are unfamiliar to them, and on the basis of those experiences, to construct narratives that help consolidate knowledge acquired, not only intellectually, but also through the body and the emotions. These activities, therefore, do not ask students to apply anthropological concepts. Rather, they encourage students to generate their own concepts and perspectives from their ethnographic experiences. When students learning the history of the discipline or engaging extensively with anthropological theory, instead, they are cultivating within themselves, in both mind and body, their own distinctive ways of understanding the differences that populate the social world. Broadly speaking, this is what I mean by anthropological competence, the capacity to perceive difference sensorially, emotionally, and intellectually, and in doing so, to assume responsibility in relation to it, to the differences. In short, and I would be happy to elaborate on this later, my view is that if I'm teaching anthropology to people who will not become anthropologists, then anthropological theory is not their problem, it's mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonardo. Let's go back for a moment because I know that Celine is with us in this moment. Celine, are you here? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So, Celine,
good to see you, Roberta.
I go back for some minutes because I have to ask you to answer to our first questions. I remember our first question is, in what context do you reach or intended to reach non-anthropologists and new audiences? Celine Gomez is a social anthropologist at the University of West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago in the Southern Caribbean. She teaches sociocultural anthropology within the sociology program and coordinates collaborative virtual learning activities across anthropologist classes at university in North America and the Caribbean. Céline is also an honorary research associate in the Department of Anthropology at University of Cape Town. Céline, I pass you the floor. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Roberta. Please excuse me. I'm sure I can just mention this in a couple sentences. But as Roberta mentioned, I teach anthropology within the sociology program. And so my contribution today is really to discuss or share how I work on this interdisciplinary anthropology minor program at the undergraduate level. And I introduce anthropology to audiences within the university, so within the institution and within academic settings, to audiences and to students primarily who have never heard of anthropology or who may not be familiar with it, who have certainly with very few exceptions, have taken courses in anthropology. And so students who come from various disciplines, primarily, of course, in the humanities and social sciences. Regrettably, we have very few who come from mathematics, for example, or the sciences. The students who come from these different disciplines, primarily in the humanities and social sciences, are really introduced to anthropology by thinking about an ethnographic mindset. So what I have called in my previous work, this way of understanding your connection with the world around you. And so cultivating, for example, empathy, connecting the personal to the political. And one of the ways that we do this is by using ethnography. And so we do, of course, virtual ethnographies in the anthropology courses that I teach. And we also do semester-long mini ethnographies. And so the students then learn, of course, about the history of the discipline, the range of the checkered history of anthropology. And then they actually go out and do ethnography themselves. And so I found that students can, of course, within certain parameters around good ethics, around safety, I found that students can develop empathy and can make these connections between their lives, the experiences of others, and also the material conditions, right, in which we live. And so they're able to make these analytical connections that allow them to articulate their experiences within wider social fields and also situated within local, global, and historical contexts. And then if I have time to make another contribution, I can give a few examples later on. So thank you, Roberta.
Thank you, thank you. And now it's Alexander's turn, but I will repeat the second questions for Céline as well. What strategies or experiences have you developed to reach non-anthropologists and new audiences? So, Alexander, it's your Alexander.
Yeah,
it's your turn.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Roberta. In such a context I described before, prior professional personal relationships were crucial for engaging non-anthropologists. At each stage, I had to demonstrate the value of my research, not only by explaining it, but by making it relevant to the concerns of those I work with. Being open to questioning, drawing on my experience at the University of Holguín and my understanding of the local context to build trust, and translating anthropological concepts into Cuban pedagogical and psychological jargon where possible were key strategies. This process involved not only translating terminology, but also bridging a different expectation about what research should do, how long it should take, and what kind of outcomes it should produce. In this sense, much of my work involved what could be described as a continuous process of an epistemological translation, making anthropology intelligible not only in language, but in purpose and practice. This also meant negotiating a pace of research, as anthropological work often requires time for observation and reflection, whereas institutional settings tend to prioritize immediate results. Collaboration was also essential. Engaging non-anthropologists required a continuous effort to build legitimacy and reciprocity, not simply extracting data for contributing to ongoing challenges. So I often moved between roles as a researcher, a psychologist, and a collaborator, supporting problem-solving processes as they emerge. Importantly, this also involved an ethical dimension. Reciprocity was not only a strategy, but a responsibility to ensure that research processes were meaningful and beneficial for participants, and not only for academic outputs. Finally, conducting knowledge transfer activities helped to create shared spaces for reflection. These spaces were important not only for communicating results, but also for interpreting them. Engagement then was not only about communication, but about the gradual construction of trust, relevance, and mutual recognition. In this process, anthropology became less a predefined framework and more a practice shaped in a dialogue with others.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, Alexander. Celine, please go ahead. It's your turn.
Thank you, Roberta. I think in addition to the semester-long ethnographies, one of the tools we use, like literal technology, right? We use actual platforms. So that at the end of the mini ethnographies that students do, they have the option to write blog posts. And so we are still focusing on the writing, of course, but students also have an option to do very short videos of 1 to 2 minutes that kind of capture the message that they would like to send to a public audience. So far, I have not managed to get the videos onto the blog, but I do run a blog doing ethnography at STA, in which at the end of the students' mini ethnographies, they, with me, of course, and with the help of some volunteer graduate students, we edit their submissions so that they're very short, their posts, and then I post them on doing ethnography at STA. What I would like to do is, and students have found also that the videos combined with the blog posts really help to introduce their peers and within their peer group. And for instance, neighbors and relatives, so moving out of the university, those who may not also have ever heard of anthropology, because anthropology is not a priority for the state, right, at this time, in the case of Trinidad and Tobago. And they found that it's a really good way to kind of capture the core ideas, or share the core ideas of ideas, but also values of empathy, of recognizing that the individual is connected to the collective, of recognizing, for example, that solidarity requires collective movements, even when you might share different opinions with other people in that movement. And so just to kind of summarize, at the end of the mini ethnographies, we draft blog posts, and students also have the option to have very short videos that I'm hoping, this is my task for the next year, to also somehow integrate into the doing ethnography at STA blog. Thank you, Roberta.
Thank you, Celine. Anita, the floor is yours.
So here, before I go into working so much with non-anthropologists, that I've worked with them mostly in educational programs, and they led them, like in the case of Martin. I'm going to show you the difference of working where I work by myself with adolescents, or I'm going back to young Ethiopian adolescents that came to Israel after passing time in refugee camps, and the teachers it raised the issue of sexual problems going on. So we did with, of course, I never work alone, with someone from the community, a girl that was here for more years. She was not an anthropologist, but we worked very well together. And the girls, what they most expressed was the lack of control, helplessness, because in Ethiopia, their parents had told them what to do, and they lived in a small traditional society. And here, all of a sudden, they were on their own, and there were pressure from the guys. They didn't know what to do. And so we began here the program with a whole series of stories and activities about internal locus of control. That means assertiveness to work, and later on the biological thing, and later on we work with the boys, and the program grew to be comprehensive. A story about Senegal many years ago, and I always worked there with young people that were trained, and I'll tell you about that later. But here, a woman that had an NGO, a Senegalese American woman, wanted us to come to a city called Kaolack. My friend and I, that we are going to train a group of young people for 3 days and work with her youth leaders that were all young Muslim schoolgirls, around 15. So we began with many stories, which I can't tell you there, and we made a card game what they'd like to learn about. And she had told us issues, decision-making, communication skills, identifying warning lights in relationships. That were the main issues. But anyhow, we played with the girls. What did all these girls want to hear about? Female and male reproductive organs. That was what they all want to learn about. So basically, and my friend was aghast because we had not prepared for that. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I said, today we'll do something else. Tomorrow we'll do that. And the electricity didn't work, so I had to just draw the organs and explain in a way that I've never done, but it was okay. After the 3 days training and all the rest of the stuff, we asked them again, what did you most appreciate learning about men and female organs? So, things can be completely different and about that. But now I want to go into the work that actually we did with people like Martin, later with the youth leaders that we put together it's like what he said, it's a youth association against HIV and other things that's all over Sierra Leone. And this is still functioning. I mean, we began this with someone from UNA's, Martin and myself, like in 13 years ago. So I'm really, really glad. So anyhow, so first we work with groups, let's say, of youth leaders. And in Israel, we call them older peers. Here they call them something else because they were closer to the age of the adolescents, but they were not 30s, 40s, 50s, or anything like that. So first we worked on group work related to issues that had to do with sexuality. Like one group in the training spoke about, they got all sorts of questions about types of boy-girl relationships in the communities, other about sexual relations, why, when, where. Another group, contraceptives, HIV, that was really spreading at the time. Today it's more or less under, and other issues. And after that, each group put up their poster and explained to the others, and there was a discussion. And this was very important because we had some preliminary interactive activities developed with people from the countries, but here we did the input of what these young people had said. And later on, with these activities, they worked with adolescents. Now, another issue that was really important that we incorporated later was like prevention of gender-based violence. Basically, we called it at the beginning warning lights in relationships with a lot of games. And we went around at the same time. And in Sierra Leone, we were 3 years after the Civil War. And Martin asked us to introduce us in our training. Now, unofficial figures say that like half the women may have been raped during that Civil War. I don't know what happened, but we had all these young people in front of us. And my 2 colleagues and Martin said, he wanted us to do it, but he says, he doesn't want to be involved. I said, okay, I will do it with only one condition, that after my workshop, we have someone that can be a closure, that all our people that are trained, if there is a young person that has been abused or something, they can go and follow up. That means legal, medical services, because usually girls are laughed at and they're not considered. And so basically, there was an association called the Rainbow Association, and they took up this thing, and they're working with them till today. So that was really interesting. The last thing I want to explain to you about you working with non-anthropologists are the rapid assessments that we did in different countries with mostly with UNAs, and one was a global plan. So these were groups like community people, and they basically, we trained them to do rapid assessment. Is a very quickly research done in 3 weeks or a month, and by many people at the same time in a specific community. And in this case, we were trying to see different issues like HIV prevention and mother-to-child transmission and the care and the cultural barriers and all this. And we had to train the community members to do this type of research. And then the analysis was quick, and we could give quick results because UNAIDS was having a problem in different countries. They wanted to have a baseline. I had a big discussion when I began because a UNAIDS representative in charge was saying, we only will study gender differences, barriers. And I said, no, we're going to do cultural barriers also, because it's not only gender. It's related, gender, but very time. So in the end, we did both barriers. And so the team was not selected by us. It was selected by our local colleagues. And in every country, the team was different. It was a team of community members. At least half of them were community members or more. Many women also, women living with HIV. And there were some young people, sometimes students. There was only, in the 6 countries I worked, there were only 2 that had anthropologists. And one I found by myself, because a local association did not find an anthropologist. So again, that my partner was not an anthropologist, and that was fine. And in the end, everyone worked together. Now, how did we do this? First of all, we did the same type of game of having each group analyze in their own the different issues, but relationships, HIV transmission, HIV care, and discuss it among everyone's. But so and did a lot of team building to get people to work together. And then we had a preliminary research tool, like an interview guy. And all these findings were developed by the team leaders, were put into these preliminary research tools. And sometimes there were problems. Like in Cameroon, we had 5 tools for women, for older women, pregnant women, professionals, traditional midwives, whole men, fathers of young children. Anyhow, so these tools were being translated into a language called Fufulde that I don't know, but the anthropologists that I got and all the people from the community that came in the extreme north of Cameroon all spoke Fufulde. And I didn't. I spoke some French and I more or less managed. They also spoke, but he spoke French, Fufulde, and everything. So they're doing this translation, and one of the women leaders called me and said, Anita, you come and see this translation. So I sit with her and the anthropologist, who was a man. There, I couldn't get a woman there. I got a woman that was an educator, and she was the number 2, but because it was really important. So she said, listen, he's saying this translation is not possible. I said, I don't know Fufulde. It doesn't matter. You will understand. What was the problem? He was using a language that they could not use for an elder woman. It was inappropriate. And this guy, the anthropologist from the same area, didn't. So in the end, more or less, I tried to manage it. I don't know. I said, listen, maybe they will know more about women. It got fixed in the end. But these are all these issues that come up in these training and translation. And then the most interesting, what did we do with these tools? 1 week we did role play. Everyone role played, everyone using the tools to see if they did it well. The other thing that I more or less invented, because I didn't find it in any place, that they interviewed in tools. Basically, one person was recording, but some of them didn't know how to write and things like that, and we didn't. And it worked wonderfully in one that didn't work. So we did it in tools, and I did this in all the raps that I did. So and then there was a lot of work done otherwise about culture sensitivity with staff on the ground, health staff, especially, for example, culture sensitivity for different groups of like women living with HIV that sometimes are ostracized. they brought it among the family, it's their fault and whatever, with commercial sex workers and so on. And another example, which the work was very similar, but the object was different. It was a work done actually in the Gambia, and I invited this person also, but it seems he couldn't come. But he's worked with me. He's been with me in various IUAS or WOW conferences and roundtable. This person was the head of the program of the Global Fund for HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis. And they needed this kind of a research. He called it an operational research in order to develop a new official strategy for HIV prevention and care. So they chose the people, of course, and also community members. And we worked, but here we worked for specific groups. Like in our group, there was a fisherman, because fishermen transmit HIV, get HIV. It's fish for sex, like it's, I don't know, going in motorcycles for sex and a lot of other things that we really don't know. And then we had commercial sex workers, and we had men that have sex with men. It was outlawed at that time.
Anita,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but we
I'm
need to
finishing.
consider the timing. Sorry.
I'm finishing, and I won't answer
It's
the
really
third
very
one.
interesting.
I
Sorry.
won't answer the third question. It's included. What I want to say is that the things that came out were very interested in this tragedy, and different the government that was a few years ago, and different NGOs implemented. So that I can speak less a third time. I don't need it. I more or less said it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Finally, Jasmine, I leave you the floor.
Thank you. So again, I've made some points. So first, I want to mention that in order to answer the second question, first I want to mention that anthropology is often considered something only for academics. So, but really it belongs to everyone. It is not just about studying cultures in classrooms or journals. It is about connecting with people, sharing knowledge, and making research useful in everyday life. Interdisciplinary and creative approaches help us to do exactly that. So the experiences and strategies I have developed are like through social media, which I'm doing right now, through my work as social media manager for the Commission on Anthropology and Education. I design posts, infographics, and interactive content that translate anthropological insights into accessible formats for educators, students, and general public. And by doing this, I make anthropological ideas accessible to wider audiences by using platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I share knowledge, stories, and community voices through these networks. It helps me in bringing academic research with everyday life, especially in diverse contexts like India, where digital platforms are reshaping identity, rituals, and activism. And yes, the work which I do is it won't be possible with the help of my intern Bhumika, and of course a nudge from Anita, and support from Giovanna and Marcia. So second point is the educational outreach. So I would like to bring anthropology beyond universities if I ever come in academics, like as a assistant professor or something. I would like to bring anthropology beyond universities into classrooms, NGOs, and NGOs, and communities. I want to create training materials, flowcharts, and easy to read articles that help teachers and organizations integrate cultural perspectives. Now, this matters because it shows how culture shapes daily life, it builds empathy, and supports inclusive education. Educational outreach is important because it helps non-anthropologists to see and understand anthropology as a tool for understanding people, not just a subject. Third is I would go for NGO collaborations, which I have already worked as an intern with Indian Red Cross Society. During my internship, I worked directly with people in disaster preparedness, health awareness, and relief programs, showing how anthropology applies outside classrooms. In short, the IRCS internship helped me to translate anthropological insights into everyday action. So I think NGO partnerships are one of the most effective ways to connect anthropology with real world social change. Anthropologists, co-create knowledge with communities design culturally sensitive campaigns, and evaluate impact through ethnographic methods. For example, in rural healthcare projects, involving traditional healers and elders made vaccination drives and maternal health programs more trusted and effective. So I'm also planning to work with NGOs, again with this IRCS society. Another point is public writing. Public writing in anthropology is about taking anthropological ideas out of academic journals and into formats that everyday readers can understand and enjoy. It's a way of making anthropology relevant to non-specialists, showing how culture, identity, and social life matter in daily experiences. Like writing blogs and articles with short, accessible pieces that explain anthropological insights in plain language. Also, short essays, storytelling, freelance editing, and content creation, which I try to do. And other thing which I want to do is interactive engagement, with polls, quizzes, did you know facts, which will result in which will result making anthropology participatory and fun. So strategies which I have developed in future, which I'm thinking I will do, is short episodes, discussing cultural insights or interviewing community members, like podcasting, visual storytelling, in which infographics, comics, and short videos will be included, which will explain anthropological concepts, and policy briefs. Short, accessible summaries of research for policymakers and activists. To wrap up, these experiences and strategies show that anthropology can move beyond theory into action, creativity, and collaboration. So by blending digital media, education, and community partnerships, we can make anthropology a living dialogue and connect research with people's everyday lives. Thank you.
Thank you too much, Yasmin. Let's now move to our fourth and final questions. How have interdisciplinary and creative approaches contributed, or how can they contribute to your goals and plans for engaging non-anthropologists and new audiences? We'd love to hear about any example or ideas you'd like to share. I ask you to be brief, so as to leave time for the final discussion. Leonardo, let's start with you.
All right, Roberta. So, well, I have the impression that we anthropologists make too little use of ethnographic experience when teaching anthropology to non-anthropologists. Perhaps we are overly protective of ethnography, believing that conducting it requires extensive theoretical and methodological training in anthropology. Or perhaps we assume that it can only be carried out through prolonged fieldwork, as the ethnographic canon has traditionally prescribed. I don't know. Only impressions. In any case, it is precisely through ethnographic experience, through a strategy that is at once highly creative and deeply traditional, therefore, that I have been trying to engage anthropologists with anthropology. In Reassembling the Social, Bruno Latour writes that description is our business. I quote him. Latour uses this phrase to emphasize that the world is made by differences that, by definition, are initially unknown to us. Yet, because our training is so often grounded in the learning of theories, we frequently find ourselves trying to explain the world before we have truly perceived it, or assuming that we already know the world before we have carefully observed it. Hence Latour's argument in the same book that the task of anthropology is to repopulate the world with its differences through a methodological premise that is simple yet remarkably powerful. The best explanation is a good description. With this in mind, at the beginning of every semester, I ask my students a series of questions. Do we really know how a school works? Do we truly understand how children and young people with disabilities experience school and the classroom, or how transgender children and young people experience school and classroom life? And there's another question that I consider equally important. Can books and academic articles by themselves provide this kind of knowledge? By inviting my students to undertake ethnographic exercises, I want them to grasp, both intellectually and emotionally, the radical nature of the differences that characterize school life. If they achieve this understanding, I believe they will become teachers who are far better equipped to recognize and embrace the differences through which their own students will challenge and engage them. More than that, I hope they will be more inclined to assume responsibility by taking an active stand against every form of prejudice and discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonardo, also for respecting the timeline. Alexander, it's your turn now.
Thank you, Roberto. In Cuba, being a psychologist already carries a high level of social trust. My background in educational psychology then functioned as an important entry point, providing both legitimacy and a shared language through which to engage with teachers at the school. At the same time, it offered an initial framework to understand it to some extent the institutional context I encountered. Then trust was not something I had to build from scratch, but something I had to learn how to use responsibly in order to introduce anthropological perspective. This requires careful positioning, ensuring that the authority associated with psychology did not overshadow the dialogical and exploratory character of anthropology. A solid understanding of adolescents, together with skill in conflict resolution, significantly facilitated openness among participants, encouraging collaboration and enabling them to engage more actively in articulating their own goals. After I collaborated in solving a conflict between a family and the school. This also meant recognizing participants not only as informant, but as a knowledgeable actor with their own interpretative framework. Interdisciplinary work here was not only about combining fields, but about adapting anthropology in practice. This involved adjusting methods, expectations, and forms of communication in order to make anthropology meaningful and accessible. It also required accepting that anthropological concepts might be reshaped in the process of dialogue with other disciplines. Creativity, thus, was not only methodological but relational. It emerged in the ways interactions were negotiated, in the flexibility to move myself across roles, and in the capacity to respond to unexpected situations in the field. Ultimately, this process also had an empowering dimension. Participants were not only subjects of research, but increasingly became active contributors, using their own voices to interpret their realities. Engagement, therefore, was not a one-way process, but a space of mutual learning between anthropology and other fields, pedagogy as well. So interdisciplinary work made it possible to expand the possibilities of the anthropology in my research practice. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Alexander. Celine, please go ahead.
Thank you, Roberta. Excuse me. In teaching anthropology to students who are not majoring in anthropology, I have found that, and who are coming from various disciplines, I've also found it very helpful to curate and kind of introduce virtual activities across the courses with students who are majoring in anthropology at the undergraduate level, for example. And so one of the initiatives that I do in the classroom, and again, this is specific to the university setting, but it also helps to kind of spread what anthropology is and kind of core issues throughout the society, is that I conduct collaborative virtual activities with courses that are required for anthropology in other universities. So in two universities, one in the United States and one in Canada, the three courses actually have a common platform in which the students communicate with each other asynchronously. We spend a good deal of time at the beginning of each semester coordinating this activity, but it's meant to complement and also to foster the knowledge sharing across the courses. So in Caribbean anthropology, for example, I have a topic on migration. And so, or on food security, or on the climate crisis, or on family and kinship. And then each year, we've run this for the past 3 years, and we will continue to do that, to do this activity this year. Each year, we kind of choose one theme, and then the students, we pose questions that the students in each course will answer. And then they read each other's answers, and then they comment as well. So it allows the the students who are doing anthropology at the University of the West Indies, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, to be able to communicate with students who are majoring in anthropology across other universities. Also, because I do this in the Caribbean anthropology course, Caribbean anthropology presents a really good kind of grounding to discuss core issues of like the contradictions of modernity, for example, the tensions of universalism and particularism, the tensions of diversity within multicultural societies, right? And so this is one of the things that I will build on. And what we've actually done for the coming year is to secure funding for a virtual field school. So at the end of this asynchronous virtual activity across the three courses, we're actually going to convene a virtual field school around the politics of indigeneity. And this, of course, involves questions like deterritorialization, questions of occupation, for example. And then we will hopefully have students who will be interested and be actively involved in the virtual field school. So thank you, Roberta. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Celine. Now I invite Anita.
Okay, now I will be very short, and I left out completely the case of working with medical students. That will be for another occasion. So basically, all the cases that I described could only succeed by engaging non-anthropologists if there's local colleagues, other professionals, community members, and many young people. And the programs that were based on applied anthropology have continued for many years because of the work of the non-anthropologist partners in the different countries. If it's work with adolescents, with health providers, and or communities. In the sexuality education with adolescents, we can say that the main object is to give them some tools to manage for having healthier or happier relations. In the rapid assessment, the quick assessment of specific issues that are really important, such as maternal health or HIV services, and learning about these services, they can also help to improve them and to use it in take the recommendations of the people. One last example, for example, in the Gambia, I continue with implementation. Some countries I finish my work and I don't know what's happening. But here they did a lot of activities like comics with picture messages, because there's still a lot of people that don't know how to read or write. So you can give them all this, or radio programs in local languages. There were a lot of programs in English on TV. In some remote places, there's no electricity and no one knows English, okay? Or, for example, community theater or activities for young people. So basically, all these examples and all the work with all these wonderful people can really help us apply anthropology. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you. Finally, Jasmine. Jasmine, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so in order to answer the third question, so anthropology becomes more powerful when it connects with other fields and uses creative methods. So these interdisciplinary and artistic approaches help me share anthropological ideas with people outside academics. So in healthcare, I am specialized in medical anthropology. So I would say in healthcare, medical anthropology combines the scientific study of medicine with the social sciences, which allows public health teams to understand how a care recipient's culture, beliefs, and living conditions, affect their health. It rejects one-size-fits-all approach. Instead, it uses flexible strategies tailored to local needs. It utilizes people-centered methods by conducting in-depth interviews and spending time in local communities so they can build trust and understand exactly why people, are accepting or rejecting healthcare advices. It also creates two-way communication, and it respects local traditions, and it helps design health programs that blend modern medicine with the cultural values and realities of the public. So if I talk about in education, anthropology promotes inclusive classrooms. It helps teachers value different cultural backgrounds, ensuring every student feel welcome and respected. It decodes diverse learning styles, and it shows that children learn differently based on their culture, moving schools away from a one-size-fits-all teaching style. It builds community connections. It encourages schools to work closely with families, bridging the gap between a student's home life and classroom life. It reduces language barriers. It helps educators understand how language differences affect learning, supporting better programs for students learning a new language. It also, in policy and advocacy, anthropology puts human rights first. It uses a social justice lens to ensure government laws protect human rights and dignity. It gives vulnerable people a voice. It shares real stories from marginalized communities, turning personal struggles into official policy changes. It challenges unfair laws, provides real world evidence, and creates fairer solutions. It stops the top down decision making, forcing lawmakers to build policies that fit the actual needs of the communities at the grassroots level. So through digital media, I would say I have been using this infographics and social posts to translate research into formats that anyone can understand. And in community partnerships, working with NGOs empowers local voices and builds participatory research. So to wrap up, these approaches, make anthropology open, accessible, and useful for people outside academics, and they help build bridges between research and everyday life, turning anthropology into a shared conversation rather than a specialized discipline. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I found all your examples really very inspiring. Sorry. And I think there are many more questions you could ask. It's now my pleasure to invite our discussant, our commenter, Mimina Pateraki, who will offer some reflections on the presentation and help us bring together the main points that came up during today's discussion. Mimina Pateraki coordinates a European project at the municipality of Korydallos in Greece. Sorry for the pronunciation, Mimina.
You are perfect.
Where she works on an Horizon-funded project on climate change, health, and resilience in the Mediterranean. She also teaches anthropology at the Hellenic Open University. Since 1992, she has worked on local education and cultural policy through dance, theater, workshop, and community networks, collaborating with students, teachers, parents, local administrators, and policymakers. Her research has explored nationalism, crisis, and citizenship through cinema and dance, with particular attention to the social transformations promoted by European policies on the circular economy, the green transitions, and the well-being. Mimina, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Roberta. Yes, if I had only one phrase to wrap up what so alive speeches we've heard today, I think that it's okay. Let's get prepared. Let's get prepared and get out to find the people that we are working with. I mean, non-anthropologists are basic our fieldwork in a sense, in the sense of research. On the other hand, I have a question. What other discipline can stand by people as anthropology can? So we need to rethink, as our presenters today talk about trust, translate, how we connect, how we make bridges between disciplines, how make bridges with the people around us, how we can fill the gap that sometimes we're facing all over around us through other technocrats, through other politicians. I mean, from Jasmine's friends and family to WOW Union, look how Giovanna transformed a lost panel to a great webinar. That is what we really need, to be out, to let's say, cross the bubble around the academic work. It's very, very important. It's where we stand. It's the way how we are established. But yes, we have to be out. I was reading Thomas Erickson a paper, and he was underlined that when you speak openly to public, or you write in a way to meet the public sphere around you, you lose academic credits. And we have to rethink about this. Because when we are ready to go out, we have to face that some of our colleagues maybe say, it's not so big academic success. But I can think that if a small child of 5 years old can understand what we really want to talk to it, to tell our story to him, her, that is a success. And yes, we have to go out to meet this generation, Yasmin's generation. I loved a lot how Leonardo met Jasmine, how Alexander met Anita, how Selene produced, breeds all this. Important to think that under this, we need to reshape the way we enter the fundings. We cannot talk about research without fundings. We cannot talk about more understanding the anthropology without institutionalization. Let me say this, we need the floor. We need to gain entry, association, unions, networks. We need to meet other people again. And let me say that anthropology can open the floor to bring back what we have lost, because we have lost our feeling of being political subjects. We can meet it everywhere now. There is a lot of fear, a lot of afraid, a lot of untrust. You, my colleagues, you tell us so nice how we need to build on trust, how we need to build on responsibility and face the inequalities that are everywhere around us. Yes, anthropology can meet non-anthropologists. And maybe, okay, that was a very nice play with words. But let me see also the time. Okay, I have 3 more minutes. I I mean, it's very nice to have the floor to talk to young children in elementary school about diversity. In Greece, we don't have such a chance. Let's think how many countries have not this chance to talk with young children in the school. And how many of our academic students are closed in the classrooms and in the libraries without feeling the ethnography. Selena told us ethnographic mindset, and it was so nice. And yes, we don't have to be so protective, even to ourselves. And I would like to end. I have left a lot of things I see because I have a lot of notes here and there. I love it a lot, all of this discussion. And I'm very glad that I'm here talking with you. And I think that the rest of the people have a lot of more interesting things for me to add to the discussion. But we need from our friends to our forum to introduce again ourselves as anthropologists. Not to be afraid to write openly, to talk openly, and we have to find the connections. We can make more bridges. And yes, it's difficult to sit beside a person and not looking him here above as a great, I don't know, philosopher or a great academic person. Yes, as much as we became more powerful, we are losing our roots. And anthropology is on the roots. I mean, it's nearby persons that we walk together. It's our job to protect them, and it's our job to give their voice. That's why we work with them, to give them voice. So I think it's much better to leave arrogance and go less and go more closer to what Socratic irony have taught us. I mean, maybe we can pretend that we don't know everything, even we have great names and great academics around us. We need to give space to people, and we need to work together to produce more strong networks in between us. I mean, in Greece, in our association, if we have a webinar with 40, 50 people, it's going to be a great success. And this is how we have to work. But it's going to be great success when we don't have only anthropologists around us. So I think as Anita, as Elena, as Alexander, as Jasmine, as Leonardo told us, we have to get prepared. And Jasmine, I think I've lost her. No, okay. We have to get prepared to get out, to meet. The social media, I'm afraid of social media. Okay, I don't like a lot, but if I had for guidance, Jasmine, I'm sure that I'm losing also my fears too. So let me see very quickly. Yes, we have to think that we have the power to challenge preconditions, and we need to practice it. We need to practice it. Our job is not about 3 or 4 hours per day lesson. It's much more than this. And I'm the last one that I can talk to you about this. I mean, all these people that are taking this, okay, it's finished my time. So yes, I'm going back.
We are in time, Emina. We are in
Yes.
time, Emina. Don't worry.
Collaborate. Thank you very much. No, it's okay, Roberta.
Okay,
It's okay.
okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mimina, for your precious comments. We now have some time, more than 20 minutes for questions and discussion. So if you would like to ask a questions, please feel free to raise your hand, or if you prefer, you can write it in the chat. I check the chat for you. Now, okay. There is, okay, this is your. Hi, Dorothy. I saw your chat now. Is there some questions? Mary Hallin is writing that you have to remember that anthropologists are collaborating with biomedical doctors, NGO, to address health emergencies such as Ebola. Yes, we know, but we are collaborating with many agencies, many associations. For example, me, I collaborate every year with different industries. So there are a lot of places where you can create bridges and collaborate with not anthropologists. You cannot talk about this in one webinar. Maybe we need more webinars to talk about our different experiences in different fields.
Roberta, there is Andrew Maxi who raises his hand. Yes.
Andrew.
I actually
you
put it in.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've put my one question in the chat, which is, I said, I'm not sure quite what Mimina said when she said something about our political positioning as anthropologists. I'd like you to develop it further, because I think part of what I want to hear is about how we can talk as anthropologists to the political world around us. How do we engage in saying things which come out of anthropology, which might help to transform the world? So I'm wondering how we might do that and whether that's our role. And I ask it because there's a constant battle that goes on about making public statements out of anthropology, about major international events, about significant local events. In South Africa, we have a major local crisis. And as anthropologists, we're struggling to think how to address that. So I'm interested to know what Mimina, who I think raised the point, can say, and anybody else.
Who wants to? Mimina.
Yes, I can start. Yes, Andrew, thank you so much. I think this is very critical. It was always very critical for anthropologists historically. I'm not opening this chapter. Yes, we need to be political subjects, we and our people around us. And I think that, yes, anthropology can help people to feel human, to feel equal, to have voice, and not to be users of platforms, users of projects, users of the road. We have to understand again how we work with trust and responsibility for each other. We are responsible people for what is happening around us, in our place, in our family, in our friends, in our school, in our academic project, in our association. We have to meet other associations around us. We have to meet especially the people who don't like, because you see, there are a lot of people that say they don't know what is anthropology, but unfortunately, there are a lot of people that don't like anthropology, don't like social sciences, and minimize the importance. Okay, this is the one part what you make me think. Being political as a human being political, I mean, to can address your thoughts, not in a sense of parties, political parties, not in that. Okay, I think you don't mean that. Okay, not in that size. Which, of course, yes, a lot of people can be in political parties too. This is nothing wrong about it, but we cannot, for instance, we were talking about the weather before we start this webinar. We cannot talk about straws Okay, we cannot talking about straws, not plastic straws, when every electronic bath machine of Europe is in Ghana's rivers. I mean, we know this and we have to say it openly. I'm saying this because I have done a lot of work in Greece about such issues, working also in European projects, which is very neoliberal, I can say, the way they are shaped, they're formed. So I'm thinking that we don't have to be, how to say, to close our minds to what is happening, to close our eyes to what is happening around us. We have to gain again our political sense as we have learned about how we can work on democracy when we are not there. We are keep saying about participative democracy, but democracy is full of sense in participating and taking the responsibility. That's my idea. And sorry that I'm getting stressed with this. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you, Mimina.
At the same time, I think, Mimina, it need to bring together with caring people that allow us to learn from them. For example, my research is I have done research in a context in which anthropology is still considered a colonial science, a colonial field, and people is afraid to share their experiences because it could have a consequence to them, and how we care those people and how we care their identities and their participation, how for example, I can't hide the school in which I did my research, but I think it's political as well, having such care to don't identify the people who told you they were resisting a very hierarchical and authoritative policy in Cuba, for example. They have done all the policy say they couldn't do. And it's important to bring that experience because you know people are there doing the job they think they should do, yeah, and not the practice the police says they must to do. So it's political as well. Care those people and at the same time show how they can practice education in another way they have been demanded.
Thank you, Alexander. There is also Verena. Verena.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm part of the working group Anthropology and Education of the German Anthropological Association. And so we are very much involved for years with this topic, and it does have overlaps with this public anthropology, but I also agree with what was said in the presentations and in discussion that it's not only about public, but it's also about different surroundings that are then confronted with anthropological topics. And what I always think it's very interesting in those discussions because a lot of anthropologists, also organized anthropologists, are at university or at least affiliated with a university. But there is also a lot of anthropologists or people who studied anthropology that are working outside of university. So from within university, it's always called we need to reach out and we need to reach new audiences. But then again, I was thinking, I mean, anthropologists that already work in different fields, like me, for example, also a lot of other members of our working group, we work in different educational or social work contexts. And maybe what is needed in these contexts is that we need to state more often that our anthropological background informs our work maybe in order to make it more visible. So that was my thought. And we also had a discussion recently in GAA meeting that, for example, some anthropological institutes are thinking about or struggling with finding new students. And the question was maybe we can use the expertise of anthropological education in order to make our, those days where interested people can come to the university and look around and see what the different fields are. Maybe we can do something interactive there or a little bit more engaging than just put a poster there and and read to them what anthropology is. So I think that's also like one vantage point or like one one way that we can use. And I think, as was said earlier, if we make it clear to people that anthropology is about everyday relations, about a change of perspective, then I think it really relates to a lot of everyday topics and social networks. And so I would also strongly welcome these attempts of making it first more visible and also more understandable in order to get our ideas across. Because I also think it's not only about research results as anthropological knowledge, but it's more about this stance and this viewpoint that you take on life and social relations that is really special for me for anthropology.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't see your name, Verena. Thank you, Verena, for sharing your considerations. I saw also Giovanna.
Yes. I think that for answering also the question of Maxi, I can say that with the other two roundtables that took place in Guatemala, we tried to answer also this question because we wanted to see how also bodies and organizations, Ministry of Education could help in changing the situation, the way of seeing the situation in the world. And it's important to understand that we can do a lot with anthropology about human rights in education, in every level of schools, in about well-being, about training schools and university, and learn from each other with partnerships. That means that you can overcome colonial mindset with learning how to have a pair relation with other countries, with other universities, with other schools, as Shelin is doing. I would like to know if there are some colleagues. I think Satoshi Arai from Japan, Joy Hendry from Scotland. Maybe they want to help us because they were in the other two roundtables. That were interconnected with this one. And they are doing very interesting things that I think they can be connected to this discussion. I let them decide if they want to share their experiences. Satoshi, would you like to share your experience?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Satoshi.
Thank you. Yes, first of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Satoshi Arai. I'm working at the Ministry of Education in Japan. Yeah, in the ministry, my standpoint is researching education system and policy in foreign countries. I'm taking a responsibility for China, Australia, and sometimes Turkey. From my standpoint, in ministry, I'm very I feel I'm a stranger in the ministry because there is no anthropologist here. I'm doing that research is very apart from the anthropological theory. However, I try to put the way of thinking of anthropology to our research, especially the education system in foreign countries. In this roundtable, we mentioned the colonialism. If we compare the education system in foreign countries, for example, the education system in Malaysia, Myanmar, Nepal, they are very influenced by the British system, and also the recent mobility of students. Student mobility is also legacy of colonialism, colonial network. And also, I pointed out the university of ranking in world, for example, the Times Higher Education ranking. It's also influenced by colonial legacy. Why the British and American universities has a top ranking always. Yeah, so I can say to analyze the contemporary education issue, the anthropological way of thinking is very important. So the anthropological education is not only teaching and learning anthropology, but also how to apply the way of thinking of anthropology to education policy, and how to realize the anthropological way of thinking to the education front line. So so not only analyzing the education, but also I set up some research program to understand the contemporary teachers' problem. At this moment, teacher is confronting with the lack of welfare and the lots of burden, like the curriculum overload. That is the contemporary all over the world problem. But the education policymaker doesn't have how to solve it. So when we introduce the way of thinking of anthropology, we can analyze the background of the issues. Yeah, maybe that is the globalization, and also the capitalism and marketization of the education. So we can give the policymakers the idea how to solve it. Therefore, I think in the national level and the government level, the anthropological way of thinking, anthropological education is very important. So I suppose the anthropologists should participate in such a governmental policy making process. Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Satoshi. Are there any other questions we would like to ask our speakers as well, or questions in general? Giovanna, what do you think? I believe also that our time has come to an end, so I now hand over to you for the closing remarks.
Yes, of course. For the closing remarks, I would like to share 3 or 4 pictures. If I may. I would like to share very few pictures. This one, for example, is a picture about a work done by Mimina in the European project, and it's about it's a poster for human rights board game. So they were discussing anthropology through games. And this is another picture playing the human rights activists Rise Up for Justice board game. Mimina can tell more about this if she wants. Another picture, this one is from Italy, and it's a lesson I gave in kindergarten about peers of anthropology. They can understand anthropology. That's why I tell you anthropology can be for any age, a lifelong learning activity that involves all the community. And this is a kindergarten near Milano, where I was asked to tell stories to students. This is a story about an animal in the park, and the students learned how to deal with the triangle between animals, humans, and environment. Very, very in a very simple way. And this one is an exhibition, art exhibition, in which I showed some pictures I did in the last years. And this is an art critic that is looking for one picture I made about one a text, a narrative text about Muslim countries, tales about Muslim countries. And I am telling the public what I did and what is anthropology in a very simple way. So, talking about anthropology. And this is from Roberta Bonetti in Italy. And here is Roberta playing with students, but she's teaching anthropology in a practical way to students. This is just to answer or to join the ideas of Mimina that she said, we have to go out, we have to be in this world, we have to connect our publications, very important publication, because they are a documentation of what we do, but this documentation must be connected, very well connected to the real life and to people. That's the importance of new audiences. And someone sometimes ask me, which is the difference between education, anthropology and education, and anthropology in other about other topics. Education allows us to go step by step. As Yasmin had to leave, but I remember she told about trying to speak in a simple way, to live in some moments, leave the jargon, the academic jargon, to make us be understood by everybody. And this is possible. We tested, and with the Task Force on Anthropological Education and New Audiences, we are giving support to many scholars, to many associations where we discovered that there was a very strong interest in education. But someone told me some years ago, no, in very few associations we are doing education. But we have discovered through the Task Force on Anthropological Education that there are many activities, many research projects, many very, very good experiences. We have to give evidence to all these things. We have to learn to make our students learn how to communicate differently. Also with creativity. The importance of creativity is that it's the bridge between academy and people and the public. So we told about theater, cinema, painting, dance, narrative here in this discussion.
Technology. So.
Yes, so it's very important to understand that creativity is not something unuseful for anthropology, but it's very important because she connects us to the public. Okay, and finally, we have to give dignity to education, more dignity. Some years ago, it was not very they did not give value to this part of anthropology. And Roberta Bonetti can tell this, because also in Italy, she found some difficulties to make herself understand what she was doing. Because other academics said maybe education is not as important as other topics in anthropology. So we have to give a dignity to education and allow to go step by step. This is education, the way of going on by educators. And also to consider many settings. because we have to understand what is happening in schools, hospitals, boarding schools, international organization, community, association, NGO, and so on. So we have discussed a lot of things. I think there is still a lot to do. And as a task force, we are available to give support also to events, webinars, and also in our commission, U.S. Commission on Anthropology on Education. We are doing a lot. So if you want to connect, it's very important to connect. And we are doing this also tomorrow with Anita. We are doing this also with other commissions. And so let's explore. The world is very large, and anthropology has a lot to do.
And it's only the beginning.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all. Thank you to Mimina. Thank you to
Giovanna, for this wonderful opportunity.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
all the discussants, the participants, and to WAU that allows us to spread the voice about new audiences. And Virginia is here, and she was the one that helped me a lot in doing this. So I am very grateful to her, because she was the first one she could understand.
Thank you very much, Virginia. Thank you very much.
Okay. And
she's always
yes.
stand by.
And also Natalia Bloch, I see she's here also. She and Junji, they did a lot and to push on this direction. So thank you to all, and see you in the next webinar with Virginia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao, thank you.
Ciao.
Have a good day.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.